This is Andrew Jorges, New York City real estate attorney, and you're listening to the Real Talk Podcast.
This is Naomi Klein, representing the Compass office in Beverly Hills, and you're listening to the Real Talk Podcast.
What up, everybody? This is Chef Jack Harris of the Talk Team Podcast.
This is Jade with the Jessica Northrup team from Denver, Colorado, and you are listening to the Real Talk Podcast.
Yo, what up, everybody? Welcome to Real Talk. Today I have a special guest, Andrew Jorges. Andrew is our attorney, the Talk Team's attorney, representing our clients both on the buy side and sell side, and even litigation on certain aspects of a deal when it comes down to it. As a Penn State grad majoring in accounting, he was employed at KPMG for a year before jumping back into law school at the Cardozo School of Law back in 2009, the height of the real estate market. Upon graduation, he practiced law at a small midtown shop that specialized in residential commercial transactions, and then transitioned to one of New York City's premier real estate law firms down on Wall Street. Ranked as Super Lawyer's Rising Star, Andrew has transacted over 1,000 buy-side and sell-side deals during his career. I can tell you from my personal experience, having dealt with a few dozen attorneys, most won't compete with the level of skills Andrew can bring to the table. Just like brokers, not all attorneys were created equal. Some attorneys will disappear when the deal gets tough, or stop responding to emails once they get their retainer, or they have too much pride and gets them way to the closing table. Andrew's been a great resource for us, and I'm stoked to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm also joined by Danielle Stout, my co-host.
What's up, everyone?
And I'm just super glad that you finally made it on.
I've been looking at your newsletters for quite some time that I've been getting for a couple of years, and finally asked me to join, and I am beyond excited.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this for you coming on for a few weeks now, so it's good to finally get you on. I know you're a listener, a fan of the Real Talk Pod, and it's always nice to have listeners also join in on the podcast.
Honored to be on. I have been listening to them, all very interesting, informative, and people from different sectors of real estate. So
yeah,
it's good
cool.
stuff.
Good stuff. All right. Well, before we get into the nitty gritty about real estate, I just want to throw out a really left field question. Just to like warm up. What is in our last guest, who you know very well, Brian Renzenbrink, asked Danielle this question. What is your most irrational fear?
My most irrational.
So Danielle, actually, you can think about it, Danielle.
Yeah, it took me at least 3 days to come back with an
she'll answer
so.
first.
You're gonna answer first, and then I'll go.
Yeah.
You piggyback and then just steal your answer. Okay.
Well, when Brian asked this, I could not come up with anything. But a few days later, I finally determined. My biggest irrational fear is waking up and being blind. So, so like when I sleep at night, it cannot be a pitch black room, or I'll wake up and I think I have gone blind.
Okay.
There needs to be like a little light somewhere.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And that is irrational, I guess.
I guess so.
Very irrational.
It's very rational to me, but
Yeah.
What about you?
For me, it's probably something similar in that I think I have a rational fear that I'm going to wake up. I have a dream that I'm still in law school. I haven't read for an entire semester. And then I have to go take the exam never having gone to class or read. And then I wake up and I realize, wow, I got to go to work. And there is no exam. So.
Anyway, so moving on, irrational fears. Congrats, you passed the bar.
All right.
You're a practicing licensed attorney.
Yes, exams behind me.
Exams behind me. Tell me, why did you get into New York City real estate? Why did you decide to practice law within that field?
I think every lawyer has some quirky reason why they enter into law, but for me, I think in some weird way, I'm first generation, my parents and my grandparents came from Cuba.
Yeah.
And so like any family that comes from another country and they leave for political reasons, you hear stories from your parents and your grandparents of some things that just don't happen in this country.
Right.
I heard stories of the government taking their property, their businesses, and when you're as for my parents, being a kid and having your home taken away by the government and then having to leave, that's an incredibly traumatic experience. So I would hear those stories, and it probably marinated in my mind as I was growing up, and then I went to college, and I was just always fascinated by real estate ownership rights. And when I got to law school, you take a property class and, what rights do you have? Right to own, right to possess, right to sell, right to purchase. Those are all things that I think really resonated in me. And during law school, I started working for a small practice doing real estate. I, again, just continue to fall in love with it. And it's going to be 8 years later, I'm still doing it.
Good.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why investors, I'm not just talking about New York City, but buyers throughout the world invest in invest in the United States, primarily because the taxes are high and government right now is probably not liked from an international standpoint, but foreigners continue to pour money into American real estate assets because not only is it a hedge against inflation, but the United States, despite what you hear in the news, still has accounting laws, real estate laws, ownership laws, where their assets are still protected by the government under these regulations and laws. You feel safer rather than, let's just say, pouring money into another country's real estate and finding out that you actually don't own them.
Sure, yeah. Listen, foreign investment in the U.S. is not stopping, right? As bad as the economy might get, or as tough as transfer taxes might be, or mansion tax, or whatever the city and federal government do to, increase what the closing costs might be to spur more money in the government's coffers. It's a sound investment. Nobody's going to knock on your door and say, "Hey, listen, this is now mine,"
Exactly.
or give it to the military.
Right.
And so there's a certain level of assurances that buyers can have that it's going to be there for a while.
Yeah. So you practice New York City real estate. Why New York City? You could have stayed in Pennsylvania.
I could have
I
stayed.
don't know.
Yeah.
What is it? What's Penn State? That city? What's it
State
called?
College.
State College City.
Yeah.
The city of
State
State College. So great name.
Happy Valley, sure.
Sorry, I'm talking crap. I've been there. Great name, guys. What's the airport called? State College Airport?
I never flew in. But probably.
It's the most original name you could think of.
Yeah, and the entire university there is. Have you been recently?
No, not in the last 10 years. My brother went there. He graduated, so I haven't been there since.
The whole town is just Penn State geared, and it's a great place.
It always has been, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great place to be between the ages of 18 and 22, or however long. For some people, a little longer. But
Must be hell if you're a grad student.
Yeah, if you're a grad student, it's a great place, great environment. But once you graduate, I want it to be New York City is just in my opinion.
Uh-huh.
Right?
And your family's from Jersey.
We're from Northern Jersey. Yeah,
Yeah.
I grew up in Northern New Jersey, and I've just I'm a Bruce Springsteen loving Jersey boy, where the city was big lights, big buildings, and any kid who's who's not from New York City that drives in when they're a kid, and you look up and you're just in awe of how big the buildings are, and you look, your neck is just stretched out, and it's New York. Where else to be?
Yeah. No, I get it. It's everybody's dream to make it here, right? If you can make it here,
You can make it anywhere.
Hopefully.
Another Jersey boy, might I add, Frank Sinatra.
That's it. That's it. All right, so Andrew and I met on a deal. He was on the other side as a sell side attorney, I believe, and I was on the buy side, or opposite.
Yeah.
Opposite. I was on the sell side. You were on the buy side.
Correct.
It was 1818 at 45 Tudor City Place.
Wow.
And I was
remember.
not a fan of the sell side attorney that was chosen, out of my control. But I realized the way you communicated, the transparency, the timeliness of your response. I thought, this attorney's pretty good. I like his style. So that was the beginning.
It seems like just
Right?
yesterday.
Yeah, and several dozen deals later. we're here.
Yeah.
What aspect of, those are some co-op deals. What aspect of a co-op deal do you like over, let's just say, another deal somewhere outside of New York, like maybe like a townhouse, single family? For you, does it make that much of a difference, preference-wise?
Well, with a co-op, with co-ops as opposed to, single family
homes in like Brooklyn or...
Yeah, the main difference is going to be, in my opinion, due diligence. Right. So you're buying into a corporation that is comprised of shareholders, right, who own stock in this corporation, and understanding the financial risks of the building. You should be reviewing financial statements, audited financial statements for the past 2 years of the building, reviewing board minutes, looking at the building's offering plan, understanding what the risks are with a particular project.
But that doesn't mean that you're doing more work for a co-op, because these townhouses, let's just say in Brooklyn, inherently have issues too.
They do. A lot of the issues are discovered in those types of deals through an engineer who's inspecting the property.
Right.
Sure, I'm looking at the property tax statements, the certificate of occupancy, are there violations? But
Seems like every house in Brooklyn has an issue with C of O.
every house
It's
in
wrong, always.
Yeah, the COs are a problem. I always say Brooklyn's, when you're buying Brooklyn townhouses, it's like the Wild West. You know, sometimes an owner 20 years ago put an additional extension on, or there's a porch, or they're using the garage as an Airbnb, right? It's just people
wild.
do things that they shouldn't do, and then during the course of the transaction from somebody buying that, you got to figure out, well, what am I inheriting? Is it worth the risk? Is it not worth the risk? And how can we come up with a solution?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it always worth it, in your opinion? If you're representing a buyer, is it always worth the risk?
So I never answer that question. I never. The number one question I get from clients are, what would you do?
Yeah.
Or what do you think? My job is not to give you my level of risk, right? Everybody has a different level of risk. Your level of risk is different. I just happen to be risk averse.
It's a business decision.
It's a business decision. So it's almost like saying, would you buy this property for $1 million, or would you buy this property for 1, 2? I can't tell you I would or wouldn't, right? The circumstances are different. I just had actually a deal not long ago where a building had a land lease where the co-op didn't own the land on which the building sat.
Sure. Who owned it?
City of New York.
Oh, nice.
So,
Was it Battery Park?
yes.
Oh, good.
So the broker on the deal wasn't totally familiar with land leases and was like, well, hey, listen, I can't believe anybody would ever buy in any land lease. That seems so odd. That Battery Park aside, any land lease is going to come to there's an expiration of the lease, and then what happens when the lease expires? You got to renew it, and then what's the term? But my client was 95 years old. He was just looking for a place, right? So the circumstances are different
He'll
for
live for 10 more years,
right.
20
Gonna
more
get a
years
good
max.
So while for him, a land lease of just 20 years is might be insignificant, and so that's a risk that he had to decide on. Me, I'm 34.
You're 34.
That's not
young buck.
not
Thank
necessarily
you for publicly announcing your age.
for those wondering. That's not a risk that I would take.
One
But
of the most eligible bachelors, ladies and gentlemen.
not
I'm
another factor. I'm engaged to be married.
You're already engaged.
No.
Sam, please don't listen to this.
My soon-to-be beautiful wife, who I love dearly.
Oh, yes.
I know, soon-to-be wife, who is beautiful.
Who is beautiful.
She will absolutely
Not seems to be beautiful.
Yeah, she will absolutely be listening.
Sorry,
to
Sam, I slipped. Let's talk about some complicated deals.
Sure.
I mean, you and I have worked on some tough deals. I mean,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
we're actually even now,
We've hit them. We've taken it to the mat a couple of times.
we've represented clients where they didn't know they owned the condo. Remember that one?
I do remember that one. Yes.
they
Yes.
forgot about it.
That was an interesting deal.
It was a condo. It was probably worth, if they put it on the official market, it was probably worth at least $550,000-$600,000. But they wanted to do it off market, so it is what it is. Your wish is my command. But remember, he forgot that he owned.
Well, it was an
owned
interesting.
it.
Yeah, it was a client, and not to get into the specifics of who it was,
No,
but
no.
long story short,
You
it
got
was
the names.
it was a scenario where a condominium unit owner thought that he lost the apartment to foreclosure, a bank foreclosure.
Yes, he thought.
Yeah, he thought.
Keyword.
He in fact didn't. The condominium association then went ahead and tried to foreclose on the common charge lien, and it took them probably almost 12 years. I then got involved. I got retained about a month or a couple of weeks before the common charge lien was going to be actually auctioned off.
Yeah.
We filed an order to show cause to stay the auction.
Okay.
It was granted. We redeemed the amount under the lien. We paid off the outstanding common charges. He got the apartment back. He sold it. Everybody moved on. It was really one of those New York stories.
Months or years of common charges can they be delayed on before the condo takes action? Is that case by case? Does it depend on the building?
Well, in this particular scenario, I think it was like he hadn't paid for 5 years or something, and the condominium was covering the real estate taxes.
Right.
So,
Let's just say 5 years. An apartment like that, it's a 1-bedroom. You're probably looking at 12 G's max a year.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember what the exact numbers were, but
Right.
that was you. I haven't thought about that deal in quite some time, but
I mean, that was a weird one.
That was a New York City story.
Very New York
Yeah.
City story.
Yeah. See,
Right.
to answer to circle back, that sort of thing doesn't happen in State College, Pennsylvania,
Never.
right?
Never.
At least you don't think it does.
But it's a pretty nice windfall to have after 30 years after owning something you thought you didn't own. You actually still had in your
It
name.
worked out.
Not bad.
It worked out.
Not a bad deal. How about some other tough deals that we worked on, man? Do you want to talk about, like, what about the one where the closing got delayed like 5 times? We actually went to the closing table.
With you because
1031 exchange too.
we've had a couple of 1031 exchanges. I know with you. I know the good thing about work. You stay on top of the files that you're on. So if you guys know when closing dates are, you follow up. Have you reached out to the buyer on their commitment letter? What's the status of the closing?
That's all the deal.
You do a good job. But a lot of agents don't do that. A lot of agents, at other brokerages don't do that. And so I find that with our deals, they tend to, from inception of the deal to closing, close more quickly.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if we have to send out a time of essence letter, we're not afraid to do that. We're very
It's like
comfortable.
a trend. We've been doing a lot of TOEs or talking about TOEs these days, huh?
Buyers want to push deals off.
I wonder why.
Yeah.
There's no
Slowing
urgency
down.
anymore. on the
No
buy
urgency
side.
whatsoever.
Even after they sign contracts.
Yeah.
They have no urgency.
Everyone's taking their time.
Seems very weird. Like, yeah, we're buying this, but we have 7 other things that are more important going on. And, TOE, we didn't know what that was. Oh, okay, I guess we'll now close.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the type of buyer that the market is drumming up, but the deals I have seen that buyers are dragging, you've got to drag them to the closing table to get them to exchange.
Tell the
with you.
listeners what TOE is real quick.
Sure. So TOE is short for time of essence. In New York, there are two. You can memorialize a closing date 2 ways, more or less. One is by having a time of essence date written into the contract. So if I'm selling to TOC and I'm selling to TOC on January 1st, time being of the essence, well then you've got to close by January 1st, and if you don't, you risk losing your deposit.
Deposit is forfeited.
Yes. Well, yes, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
The other way that you can memorialize a closing date, which is how the majority of residential closings are memorialized, is you have an on or about date,
Yes.
which says, I will close with TOC on or about January 1st. So either party can really push the closing for a reasonable time, which New York courts say is about 30 days. But I can't force you to close on January 1st. All I could do is, if you fail to close on January 1st, I wait till January 2nd. I serve you a TOE notice for 30 days thereafter, and then that has the effect of unilaterally designating a time of essence closing date. Boring stuff, I know, probably for many of the people listening to the podcast, but
No, actually,
a very important
when 10%
tool.
of your purchase price is on the deal, is on the hook to be potentially forfeited, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, look, a lot of clients, you and I have many clients that are selling properties that are vacant.
Yes.
Right, so for every day that goes by, that's one additional per diem day of mortgage,
That's right.
common charges or maintenance,
right.
property taxes, right? So if you have a buyer that's just dragging their feet, really potentially reconsidering the deal, and it's not our preference to do that. We don't like sending time of essence letters, but if you have somebody who's refusing to close, what else do you do? That's what the law says you can do.
Right. Tell me, what was the dollar volume you did last year? How much property did you represent in closings?
Last year, if I had to guess, probably somewhere around $100 million worth of closed business.
$100 million.
Yeah.
Could you roughly estimate how many units is that? How many closings is that?
Oh, I couldn't even tell you the
I mean, because
exact number.
the average price in New York City for condos is 1.5 million. Average price for co-ops is like somewhere in the 1.2 million range. So you're probably at, obviously you're going to have a couple big ones here and there. You're probably at maybe almost 100 closings. Or a little under 100 closings.
Probably north of there. Don't forget, a lot of deals also fall apart at some point during the course of the deal.
Always.
So, somewhere around there, north of there. Some deals tend to be bigger than others. We've had some, sexy deals the last few years that, made it into different publications, which we're proud about. But every deal is different. And
what is the
its nuance.
publications, like New York Times, or are you talking about like industry magazines that we don't know about? We've
had some deals that show up in the Times, the Real Deal, Real Estate Weekly that get picked up, but you pick up the publication and say, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's my deal.
Okay. Tell me about what was the largest deal, single transaction that you represented last year? How much was it?
We did a deal for almost 20 million.
20 million.
Yeah.
20 million. Was it a house?
It was a townhouse.
Townhouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Townhouse downtown.
And you were on the buy side?
I was on the sell side.
You were on the sell side, okay.
Yeah.
So what type of people get into that, properties like that? Well, who was the buyer? Without giving without spelling names or trying to rhyme out a name.
I don't like to get into who the specifics are, but Splash. I mean, we represent people in deals that are musicians and athletes and people that are in politics and finance, and that's the interesting part of the job. Where every file, I always joke, I say each file is like an episode of a show. Where a new villain is presented, there is a
AKA the buyer or the seller.
There is some obstacle that has to be overcome, and then you get to a successful conclusion at the end, and then you roll credit, and then the very next week there's a new villain that is presented and a new obstacle, and so every deal has its nuance. But I think that, to me, and maybe you tell me if I'm wrong, is that what keeps you? That's what keeps your feet moving. Is just
there's hair on every deal.
Every deal is different, and you got to roll your sleeves up and figure it out. And that's what keeps me interested.
The challenge is always there. It's always a different challenge. Now, I'll tell you what. I do wish sometimes there were no villains in some episodes. In my opinion.
Then it's just a boring show.
It would just be a boring show, but our lives will be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But as they say in our business, no low pressure guarantees low results, and high pressure sometimes gives you high results.
Here you go.
Doesn't guarantee, but high. For some of the listeners, I mean, this is a business entrepreneur podcast. What kind of advices can you give to people that are maybe thinking about going to law school? Maybe they are already in law school. They're about to graduate. Maybe they want to get their foot into the industry. What would you recommend?
The advice that I would give somebody coming out of law school who is is interested in getting into this field is, you have to absolutely know you got to figure out the skill set, learn your craft, and learn the A to Z, and that takes years. I mean, you don't just start developing relationships with brokers and developing a client base overnight. You've got to do your homework. You've got to understand the legal issues that are happening. You've got to become extremely proficient at what you do, because a buyer is gonna know. What your knowledge base is, and how responsive are you, and how creative can you get in your contract drafting? Do you know ways to keep closing costs down? Those are all things that you have to learn right out of law school.
Right,
so
the basics.
You need to learn the basics.
Do you learn closing costs at law school?
No, they don't teach you anything at law school. Except
Probably graduate knowing really nothing.
You know
need to
very
use.
little. I mean, that's the honest truth. You understand, you read a lot of cases on due process and First Amendment rights and gun. I mean, those are all fascinating topics.
Great.
But that is
Super
not
fascinating.
going to help you close
That's
the deal.
not how to do a deal.
No,
Right.
the word SEMA, right, is not
Or FERPTA.
or FERPTA. Yeah, those words. Yeah, those types of words are not.
Doesn't have it.
No, and so you've got to. I think you got to really learn your craft. Cut your teeth with somebody who knows what they're doing, and then eventually, once you know what you're doing and you have a strong handle of the practice in that legal area, you will start meeting people that are like-minded, that are hungry, that work hard. You and I feel like, are very like-minded. We both are
hungry,
very hungry. We're driven. We want to do a great service for our clients. We want to grow our network of
Above and beyond.
There you go. So that's my
great advice. So now you've been relatively successful, selling $100 million last year. Good start. Obviously, when you look at the bigger picture of things, that's not the end, right? What is your ultimate goal in the next 2-3 years, and what kind of legacy do you want to establish for yourself, let's just say for the next 20 to 30 years?
Yeah, I want to continue to grow a very well-respected real estate practice and a practice group where brokers feel incredibly comfortable referring their clients to me. They refer each other to me, and that they think that I'm the most responsive attorney in New York. I want attorneys to work with me that are equally as responsive, knowledgeable, and respected. I think just continuing to grow what we're building is very important.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
Good. Great. So Danielle has.
So let's see.
She
Let's
went
get it.
deep today. Danielle went
Let's
deep
get
today.
it.
So just get
Oh,
ready.
gosh.
Get ready.
All right. How does being a real estate lawyer change how you view real estate in New York City as a potential buyer, or because you are also a buyer yourself?
How does it change my view of New York City? I think a good example is I'll be walking down the street on a Saturday, going to get dinner with my soon-to-be wife, and we'll pass a building and an address that just sounds familiar, and I'll look and I'll say, oh, I did a deal in that building, and these are the issues in the building, and the building has an underlying mortgage that is or is not problematic, and they have a bed bug issue. Just kind of pulling back the curtain on these buildings that, as a kid, I would come into New York and look up and be awed and all that. Just getting a better understanding as to how they look and how they feel and how transactions happen in them, to me, is just something that will continue to do, and it's a super rewarding thing.
Nice. I feel
Yeah.
the same way as an
Yeah.
agent too. You know so much more about the
I know
buildings that
place.
you're walking
Yeah,
past.
for better or worse.
Exactly.
For better or worse.
That's it.
No, come on. You have a personal question too. Come on now.
Switching into law after a different career.
Oh, after KPMG for a year.
If I had
And
to,
does that
Yeah, what's
help
your
you?
advice for people who are looking to change careers from one industry to another?
And does your accounting background help you?
somebody who's looking to change careers, get experience in that field before you jump ship and do law school, right? I think if you're
Did you jump ship?
I jumped ship out of accounting. Yeah, you
Yeah.
bet I did.
What were you doing at KPMG? Were you audit?
I was in the audit practice group there.
Yeah.
And
What kind of companies were you?
I was working at a cosmetic company for a while. I audited a cell phone company. I did a couple of I was on a rotation. It's a great company to work for. It's just
Sure.
accounting was not
After
for
you,
me.
after a
After
year.
doing it for 5 years?
Yeah, I did it for one. Oh, I did
Studying
it.
it
I
for-
studied it for 4 years. Yeah, but a great place to work. I actually really enjoyed it, and I keep in touch with some people that I work there with. It was really great place to
Does
work.
your accounting knowledge help you in your law practice now?
I think so. Look, I review hundreds
Right.
of financial statements every year for
It's your
different
biggest
buildings.
selling point.
Right. I review hundreds of them.
Yep.
And so you got to understand how to read a balance sheet. What is
Yeah.
what is a balance sheet?
Yeah.
What are the line items on there? What is an income statement? Those are important things that I don't, I'm sure, I would hope most transactional attorneys understand what they're reading,
Yeah,
but
let's talk about this real quick. So,
Yeah.
what do you look for in a building? And from what I see, the same thing. No building is also perfect. What types of things make a building financially sound, or what do you look for and what do you see?
good question. When I'm doing due diligence on a building, I start and then end again. I'll review them at the end of the process, but I start with the financials. And the types of things, you can really paint a pretty clear picture on a building's health and what's going on from the financials. And so with the balance sheet, what are the things I'm looking for? Are there receivables? Meaning, are the shareholders or unit owners not paying their association fees on time? If you're not, why? Does the building have a reserve fund, meaning a rainy day fund, that's set aside for pet projects or capital improvements?
Or unexpected costs of gas or
Or whatever the case
litigation.
or litigation. And so you see that. Does the building have an underlying mortgage that is owed? Does the building own the land on which it sits? Is the building operating at a gain or loss? What are the operating expenses? I mean, these sorts of things are critical in determining the financial stability of a building. And then also in the footnotes, which are incredibly important. And I know reading financial statements it's a boring thing to do for a lot of people, but you go to the financials, it's going to disclose in there: is there a flip tax? How many units are in the building? Is there litigation? Are the workers participating in the union? So there's a whole host of things that you can determine by reading the financials that every buyer, and I give this to my buyers, I walk them through it, I explain to them what the sort of metrics I look for, right? For example, your reserve should be a certain percentage of your operating expense. Your underlying mortgage should be, a certain size based on the number of units, so on and so forth. And I give my clients what my thoughts are on the building.
Can you give me an example of a really badly managed building financially and why?
A poorly managed building is a building that is not collecting association fees from unit owners in full and on time. It has a zero reserve. It doesn't own the land on which it sits, and the land lease is coming up to expire.
West 57th Street.
The income that they do generate is not enough to cover the basic operating expenses.
Sure.
They're imposing enormous capital assessments.
Sure.
There's enormous litigation going on in the building. That's the
dream.
These are the sorts of things that I'm looking for. These are red flags that each one in and of itself might not be a showstopper for a buyer to buy, but I want my clients to know these are the risks, this is what I'm getting into, and I know that after I buy, is my maintenance going to go up, or am I going to be hit with an assessment? What's the likelihood of that? That's what we want to avoid.
Sure, okay.
It's not an exact science.
I was going to hope you were going to give me an address or something, but it's all good.
No,
it's all good.
No.
If you want any addresses, just email me and I'll give you the lowdown. At any event, all right, so I really appreciate it. I know we're running out of time here, so I just wanted to say thank you for coming on. Just to close out, is there any message that you would like to give to the listeners, or maybe talk about a funny factoid about yourself?
Funny foul, man! You're really putting me on the spot here to close it out. I would tell like a funny joke, but
or you could tell a funny joke.
We're
very flexible here. Like Kyle Blackman would say, my middle name is flexible.
My middle name is flexible. All right, I like that. I have no story. I have no joke. I'm boring, but thank you for having me. And I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to continuing reading your newsletters and your podcast. Danielle, you're doing awesome.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you all for listening to the Real Talk Podcast. See you next episode. Bye-bye.